Hello, my name is Cayce and I am a first-year environmental sciences master's student. My project is assessing conservation and environmental trade-offs of rice residue management for waterbird habitat creation. Fallow season flooded rice can replace lost wetland waterbird habitat, especially in this region. Agroecology, which I define as the balance of farm production and biodiversity conservation, can allow society to simultaneously protect wildlife, increase ecosystem health, and maintain the ability to produce food sustainably around the world. In this region of the lower Mississippi alluvial valley, much of the original bottomland hardwood forest has been drained for agriculture, resulting in massive loss of habitat. Fallow season flooding of rice fields for water birds can replace lost wetland habitat and provide agronomic benefits. Earlier fallow season flooding of rice may increase waterbird conservation value. This could benefit many waterbird species, especially transitory long-distance migrant birds, such as shorebirds, many of which are critically endangered or have steeply declining population trends. Additionally, agricultural producers may benefit from early flooding programs as an alternative income stream, and producers will benefit from increased residue decomposition by being submerged for a longer period of time. There exists a knowledge gap of the environmental and conservation costs and benefits of these practices, so they need to be assessed. The waterbird conservation impacts of these modifications are largely unknown. Earlier flooding could result in further depletion of aquifers in the area, and also anaerobic decomposition of residue may increase methane emissions. These practices may provide incentive for an alternative to residue burning, and also flood timing and residue burning effects on emissions are largely unknown. Therefore, to fill in some of these knowledge gaps, the objectives of my project are to, 1, assess the modifications of rice residue management practices to determine their conservation value to waterbirds, and 2, measure turbulent flux emissions of greenhouse gases of rice residue management practices for waterbirds. For objective 1, I hypothesize that modification of fallow season flood timing impacts waterbird conservation. Specifically, I predict that earlier fallow season flooding will increase waterbird conservation value. My second hypothesis is that water depth and coverage of fallow season flooding impacts waterbird conservation, and specifically predict that relatively shallow, partially flooded fields will increase waterbird conservation. My third hypothesis is that residue management type prior to fallow season flooding impacts waterbird conservation. Specifically, that residue management that reduces the amount of residue will increase waterbird conservation. For objective 2, I hypothesize that the modification of fallow season flood timing impacts greenhouse gas flux. My prediction is that earlier fallow season flooding will increase methane emissions. My second hypothesis is that the type of residue management impacts greenhouse gas flux. Specifically, residue management that leaves more residue submerged will increase methane emissions. To address objective 1, I will conduct waterbird censuses of fallow season rice fields. I will census 32 production-sized commercial rice fields in Northeast Arkansas. The study species will include Anseriformes, Charadriiformes, and Pelicaniformes. Each field will be censused 3 times during the fallow seasons of 2021-22 and 22-23, between 0800 hours and 1600 hours, and at least 1 hour will be spent scanning each field for birds. All water birds in a field will be counted and identified to species, and birds flying over the field will be excluded. Variables recorded during each census will include water depth, the percentage of the field covered by water, mud, or dry soil, and the percentage of residue remaining in the field. To address objective 2, I will measure turbulent flux emissions of greenhouse gases of fallow season rice fields. Meteorological stations paired with eddy covariance towers will be installed at commercial production-sized rice fields in Northeast Arkansas. Climate data and gas flux measurements will be collected throughout the fallow season. The treatments will include not burned and flooded field versus a burned and flooded field, an early flooded field versus a standard timing flooded field. Next, I would like to highlight an anecdotal preliminary result of waterbird use of early flooded field. A 44-acre field was flooded on September 17th, and the census was conducted on October 9th. Over 6,000 water birds were counted in this one field, and many of the other fields that were flooded early that were censused this fall had similar results. So the increased conservation value of early flooding is promising. In conclusion, this research will generally help promote agroecology and will increase the understanding of water bird conservation. This research will also help validate funding for large-scale early season and all-winter flooding programs and help facilitate a paradigm shift beyond waterfowl-centric conservation models to an all-birds model. Additionally, I hope to help develop cost-benefit analysis of fallow season flooding for water birds through a better understanding of its environmental and conservation impacts. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to bringing you more results of my research next year.